Hello, and thanks for joining us once again on the Adventure Habits podcast with me, David Overton, sponsored by Splash Maps, where we make the finest adventure maps in the world. Today on Adventure Habits, I'm absolutely delighted to have someone who'll be an inspiration to you and whose habits we'll share in the second half of this pod. But I'd really like to introduce you to Paul Taylor from React. Paul, hi, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. Pleasure to be here.
That's great to have you there. And you're dialing into us from the Sunny Lake District.
That's right. I am up in Sedbergh School, where tomorrow we are starting an international responder course. The school very kindly let us use their grounds and their facilities during half term, and we're obviously right on the doorstep of the lake, so we can step out into the hills. So it's a great location.
Oh, fantastic. So as a bit of background, let's find out more about what React is and how come you're training these people and what are they being trained for?
Yeah, thanks. So React is I'll give you the potted history. We were formed in 2015 in response to the Nepal earthquake. And what we do is emergency humanitarian response. So we work from the impact of the earthquake or when the hurricane makes landfall for what we theoretically call the emergency phase for about 5 or 6 weeks. And then as that country starts to recover and you see the bigger, more established humanitarian actors start to arrive, that's our kind of signal to withdraw. Our mission is rapid humanitarian action for the hardest to reach and most vulnerable. We're not all military veterans, although we were initially. We're much more diverse now, but we've got a strong military thread running through what we do. So our teams are self-sufficient. That's what people will be learning to do here up in the lakes. They've got their own food, water, shelter, communications, and medical support. And we try and get to the kind of areas that other humanitarians might not be able to operate in as efficiently because they're focused on other things.
Right. Okay. So you're really training people on what it's going to be like for them when they get deployed out to.
Yeah, it's two phases really, David. At this stage, it's training and selection. So these people are already React responders, and they've been trained to support UK resilience and operate in the UK. So they've decided to take the next step and demonstrate to us, the training team, that they've got what it takes to respond in the international environment. So it's selecting people who've got the right aptitude, whilst the other kind of 50% of it is giving the skills that they need to operate in that new environment.
Okay, great. And for UK responders, you picked a suitably soggy week for them to get started, right?
Yeah, I mean, it just, as so often happens, the stars all aligned and it is chucking it down with rain, so it's going to be great.
Perfect. At Splash Maps, we love that kind of weather. Perfect. And so, Paul, why not give us a little bit of the background for yourself? I noticed you've got an MBE, and that comes at the. I guess that came at the end of I'm guessing now, but did that come at the end of a long, illustrious career in the military?
That actually came for humanitarian response. So my career really, there's kind of three areas to it. The first one is the British Army, and I joined the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers as a junior leader in 1985. I then had a full career, so for 26 years in all the normal places you would expect someone to have served during that time zone. I left in 2011, and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. I was thinking about teaching. The Army paid for me to do an English literature degree, and I was investigating that. And as so often happens in life, someone said to me, "Oh, you should speak to this guy who might be interested in some of the things you did while you were in the Army." And I ended up moving into the expedition industry, working with some incredible people in places like Gabon, Sierra Leone, Nepal, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, Botswana, all over the place. I really enjoyed it, and I thought, this is me. And then until I wake up on a beach one day and I'm a bit bored, I think I'll just hone my craft as an expedition guide.
Yeah.
And then in 2015, as a result of having spent some time in the mountains in Nepal and having some medical skills. I was asked to be part of a small team that went out to Nepal in the aftermath of the earthquake, 25th of April, to work with some climbers to get to the people, talking about vulnerable and hardest to reach, that people couldn't get to because the roads were down and there was only helicopter access. So I joined that team, had a really fulfilling experience, and on reflection, having said that, I thought the expedition industry was what I'd stay in, I thought this is what I really want to do. So I spent some time volunteering, went up to Manchester, did a master's in international disaster management, thinking I would get a job in the humanitarian sector somewhere. And I got this job that I've now got as international operations manager with React Disaster Response. And on the back of some international work and some support to UK resilience during the COVID pandemic, I was awarded an MBE. But as ever, you just get it because you're the headline person who's the ops manager. There are a lot of people underneath me who are doing all the hard work.
Oh, fantastic. And I love that. So a big shout out to all the other people in the React team.
Absolutely.
Many of whom I was absolutely delighted to meet just last week in your fabulous kind of rural location in Wiltshire as well. I just loved that trip. Even just the journey over was an adventure. And there was a prevalence of old colleagues of mine as well. There's quite a high proportion of Ordnance Survey people there, from Toby Wicks, who
Louisa.
So he's the CEO now there, isn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
So he and I used to work together. In fact, we very rarely worked together. He tended to leave jobs and I tended to move into them. And even your head of people was
Jane.
the same. Jane, she helped recruit me into Ordnance Survey.
Wow. Yeah.
Years ago. So so it was quite. I
mean, and we spend a lot of time with maps of, obviously, with varying shapes and sizes, and on and on paper and on fabric and on tablets and phones and whatever. Even just planning this course, which is, without giving too much away, it involves a kind of little bit of a kind of walk in to an operational area and some moving between stands. That is all obviously done on various forms of map that people can refer to.
No, wonderful. And the humanitarian part of it is close to our hearts here. So Ian, my colleague, also ex-Ordnance Survey. It's a really exclusive club, isn't it? He gets deployed by Map Action on a regular basis. So he's the guy that does some of the nerdy map stuff that they do. Probably your equivalent of Louisa, who was from Ordnance Survey.
That's right.
As well, who I met the other day.
Yeah.
So so it was great. It was like being enveloped into something that felt like home.
Yeah.
So you've been setting this exercise up on paper maps and on the electronic maps, I guess, that Louisa sorts out. But you've also got another map with you, I guess, which
I have. Yeah, I've got it here. You very kindly, David, when you came down, let me get the title so people can see that. Yeah, I've got a splash map of Sebba, which I used, which in all honesty I did use this morning. And it was very handy because it was chucking it down with rain, obviously, in the Lake District.
You didn't break it then?
I didn't break it.
No,
and what is really useful is that we have got even if you've got a pretty good case for your phone, sometimes the screen, obviously, it doesn't work that great when you're trying to move it around when it's chucking it down with rain, even if it's still waterproof inside. It's the kind of surface layer on the top. Also, the OS maps here, as ever, the map sheets are joined right on the bit where all the stands are going to be. So there's lots of joining maps together. And here we've got the whole thing, which was useful, and and not having to get a whole map out and just a kind of a fist size to move a couple of kilometers at a time was really useful.
Yeah. Well, fantastic. So you held it in your fists and And that's, yeah, it's a neat way of doing things, isn't it? You can thumb your route when you've
Yeah,
got it like that. It's
yeah,
much sort of like ground to map to ground
yeah. Map to
navigation.
ground.
That's
Yeah,
the way I kind of
yeah.
I like to think of it. Brilliant. And yeah, so anyone watching that on YouTube or whatever, you will notice it's not quite our usual finish. Well, that's because well, we've designed it for response, so things have to be out there super quick. So we can't do our usual careful job of overlock, stitching the edges, etc. But we've chosen a material that should, I hope, last a long time and at least outlast the disasters that you're preparing for. So great. Well, look, thanks very much for testing that out for us. So far, so good. But the training is yet to begin. So I will hold my breath with that one and just remain hopeful for it. So in your experience, I mean, this is a long military experience now, as well as the humanitarian one, and you've been inspired by the Himalayas, the earthquake there, and getting going there. So what do you what do you look for in the qualities of someone who might want to join React or a similar humanitarian organization?
Good question. I think you can probably break that down into three different components that all start with C.
Oh, that's good.
And the first one is competencies, and that's skills, knowledge, and experience. And what you really want, I mean, we're gonna train them over this weekend on some of the competencies, and that's linked to what we do and our operational capabilities. And the first one of those is situational awareness, which is a kind of understanding of what's going around you, um, being able to make an assessment of its consequences and maybe a projection of what that might look like over time. Um, and with that, the way that we normally do that is through the people who have been affected by the disaster. And often the parts of the world that we go to, it will be a head man, and we call that a key informant interview. And so what's really important for, I would say, humanitarians writ large, but especially in what we do, because you're speaking with people from different agencies. Disaster response is a team sport. You're always working with other humanitarian actors, and you're
Mm,
speaking to the most important people, the people who've been affected by the disaster, and they are people who may still be in crisis because of the event, because of the magnitude of it, the consequence. They might have lost loved ones. So it's people who have got really good or are able to develop really good interpersonal communication skills. Um,
yeah.
and and you might have to do that in another language. You might be doing that through the means of an interpreter. But there's still a lot you can do with regard to, even if we can't speak the same language, I can still show you that I'm listening actively and I'm trying to develop rapport and I've got some empathy by my non-verbal communications and my implicit as opposed to my explicit communication. So we need people who can do that. And we
Yeah.
need people who can, in terms of the places that we go to in the sustainability bit, people who can um, use the water purification devices that we're going to bring with us. A lot of emphasis on, because we're remote communication, satellite dishes, satellite phones, remote trackers. So people who are able to keep them and their team on the road whilst developing this situational awareness.
Okay. So that you're basically spinning a lot of plates once you're
Spinning a
out.
lot of plates, and if that's the first thing we do, there's also a requirement for a bit of incident management. If the
Yeah.
incident managers are affected, so people who are really organized, people who are good at working in teams. And then the last bit is logistics. If you know where the people who've been affected are, there's a coordination mechanism. We then help out with what we call last mile logistics. So getting whatever we deem they needed on that first assessment through that key informant interview to them on helicopters, back of motorbikes, trucks, on foot, whatever it might be. And I would say the most important bit or attribute that people need, if they're the C, if they're the capabilities and the competencies, the next bit really is character.
Yeah.
And you really need to be someone who is quite resilient in the kind of truest sense of the word, that can kind of bounce back to your normal shape from adversity. Because disaster response is peaks and troughs, right? And it is the environment that you are working in is always uncertain. It's ever changing because you have secondary hazards, aftershocks, secondary hurricanes. So you need people who have got a good sense of humour, who are pretty robust, and can just put up with the kind of things that life throws at you. 1 minute you're right at the top of the mountain, metaphorically, and it's great, and the plan's going to work, and the next minute it's all gone wrong, and you're sliding back down, and you're dusting yourself off, and you're on plan B. And if that's the character, the third bit really is about chemistry. No person is an island. And going back to this bit about the team, we work in 4-person teams, sometimes in 2-person teams, and you've got to be able to get on with other people, your teammates, other humanitarian actors, affected population. And I would sum it up by saying you must be the sort of person who can put the affected population, the mission, the task, how we're going to help them, your teammates before yourself. And for some people, that's quite difficult.
Yeah.
And that's doing that whilst not acknowledging that you're not driving yourself into the ground. So I'm still kind of maintaining, and we might talk a little bit about that later on. I'm still managing to maintain myself and keep myself going, but I'm also not doing that to the detriment of the other people in the team. So one of our values is selfless commitment, which is absolutely what you need if you want to be a disaster responder.
Wow. Okay. So you're kind of like self-aware, empathetic
Yeah.
person is what you're after. It's
Yeah.
I
So
can see.
self-aware, empathetic person that has got the ability to learn some new skills, but has got a really positive attitude and can get on with other people and put other
So
people before themselves.
so if there's anyone that's listening to this, should we put a link below this on the website so that they can get in touch with you or other
Yeah, that'd be
humanitarian
great. Thank you.
organizations? Yeah, we'd love to do that. And I know that we get a lot of people like that tuning into this, so it'd be an absolute honor if it can result in someone coming and joining the team. Um, okay, great. So we've got that. So if you've got the competencies, you've got the character, you've got the chemistry, then React sounds like a great place to join. And what I understand about what React now with the overseas work is that you've had a lot of quite recent topical work in Afghanistan with the earthquake there. I think you were in Morocco as well. What's been the most challenging of the recent experiences that React have had?
Good. Yeah. So we do two things. One is, well, three things I'll say. So one is sudden onset emergencies. So these are the things that the earthquakes, the hurricanes, the tsunamis, they are sometimes in more permissive environments. You mentioned Morocco. Turkey was another earthquake that we've responded to quite recently. We also carry out capacity strengthening training, trying to develop the capabilities of local humanitarian actors. And what we've been doing a lot more recently is responding to complex humanitarian emergencies. And we identified, I'm going to say about 3.5, maybe 4 years ago, that if the primary driver of humanitarian need globally is conflict, then we need to be able to respond to these places that are affected by conflict. And thus far, we have been doing that since shortly after the invasion of Ukraine. We've been working with a small Ukrainian charity, carrying out a number of different tasks in Ukraine, responding to the need. We've also responded this year to the earthquake in Myanmar. That was politically challenging, as our government and others don't recognise the junta, the regime that's in power there. So gaining access was challenging, and challenging for our humanitarian principles, and particularly our principle of impartiality and neutrality. So we need to do it. We need to get to those people who are vulnerable and hardest to reach, help them in the best way that we possibly can. In this instance, we facilitated another humanitarian actor to do that, whilst making sure that it's needs driven and we're not just going to the places that are the government deemed that we should have to go there because they're areas that are where the government gets their support from. So
Wow.
there's always a layer of political complexity wrapped around every disaster. Often, sometimes it's fair to say, at the detriment of the people who really need your help the most. So you've got to navigate that. And most recently, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I got back from Afghanistan and the political complexity around being there.
I mean, extraordinary, and the situation there, that they even switched off the internet, didn't they? At
Yeah,
the Taliban,
yeah.
um, all sorts of unexpected troubles that can actually happen to you while you're out there, that might be thrown by Mother Nature, might be thrown by the political system, could be.
Yeah, there are. You're right. There are always we call them secondary hazards, and I mentioned it before. When I was in Nepal in 2015, I was in Tamil, which some people will be familiar with, the tourist area of Kathmandu,
Mm,
loading up a truck to go and respond to the first earthquake, which happened on 25th of April,
yeah.
which was a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and we were caught up in a 7.2 magnitude earthquake in Tamil, which was absolutely terrifying. Buildings were falling around us. We helped pull some people out from the rubble, etc. But when we had quite literally dusted ourselves off, well, in most, I guess, jobs or ways of life, that would be a pretty good excuse to take half a day off or a day off. Well, we were responding to the first earthquake, so we got back in our truck. We had about a 7-hour drive out to Gorka, which was the first affected area was. We got out about half hour outside Kathmandu. There are four of us in a 4x4. We
Mm,
hadn't said a word to each other in about 30 minutes. We just like stunned silence. And then
yeah.
we stopped at this little cafe. Everyone got a Coke. And then we just all took a deep breath and we were like, everyone okay? Yeah, we're good. Then we kind of, did a bit of a debrief on that. Everyone was okay. And then we drove off. And then the next day we're up in the mountains in Gorka trying to get to people up there.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So secondary can actually be as big as
Yeah,
primary.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
the same in the Caribbean, where we're now in the Atlantic hurricane season.
Mm,
So from May till November, you see these big weather systems form up off the coast of Africa, and they come across towards the Caribbean, which is the first place it might impact, or they hit the kind of eastern seaboard of the United States, or they might get down into the kind of Central America. And if you're there responding to one, number of occasions it's happened to me, another one is formed up and is coming towards you. And if you're a humanitarian, you can't really cut and run like lots of the tourists will do.
mm,
You've got to use your knowledge and experience to help the local population, who, two occasions where I've been there now, we're going to hunker down. So
yeah.
we can help you with boarding up windows, clearing all the debris from or outside the building, which is sometimes is what really injures and kills people. When you can imagine motorbikes flying around because these winds are so powerful, corrugated iron, things like that, old tools, and just making the area as safe as we can. And then we're going to hunker down, and then we'll
Yeah.
ride out the storm, and then we'll pop up afterwards and see what the effects are, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that just 2 episodes ago, we had a a veteran from the American Special Forces, Mitch Utterback, and his expression for that was "run to the guns." You're
Yeah,
trained to run to the guns,
yeah,
and
exactly.
I think that's exactly what you're describing there. And funnily enough, he's now working in disaster response in the States, in floods and whatever, and similarly works like yourself actually in the COVID
Yeah.
or the planning and organisation. A terrific amount of logistics that you got involved with there too. Well, listen, Paul, in terms of humanitarian stuff, in terms of the veteran background, etc., I think we can establish that you're very well qualified to help us all with our adventure habits. Thanks so much for this first half of it. We're going to take a quick break and have a word from our sponsors. And then we'll come back and we'll move on to the exciting bit of this, which is, well, what are your 5 adventure habits? Okay, so see you after the break. So when you get a splash map, you'll notice the print on the material is super sharp. That's because when we started this business, we needed this product to be as clear as a paper map, but without any of the disadvantages of folding and getting mushy in water and mud. So this is a tight woven polyester. This is a fabric that won't stretch even when you wash it. And we'd encourage you to put it in the washing machine quite frequently. You get a key to explain exactly what you've got on the map. It's stitched with an overlock all the way round, and that's so that it will never fray around the edges. If you want to increase your adventure habit, head over to our website and set up your personalized map in whatever format you want today. Okay, and welcome back after that break. We've got Paul Taylor here from React. And in the first half of this, we learned a great deal about what it is to be a humanitarian. There's great stuff in that first half if you really are interested in helping out people in complete dire need. You've got to be able to go in there. You need to have the character, the competency and the chemistry to get on with people while you're there. And while we've got Paul here, we're now going to ask him about his 5 adventure habits. So we've all been waiting for this, Paul. Give us your adventure habit number 1.
Okay, number 1, there's two bits to number 1, if you'll let me have that. So the first one, I guess a lot of people might say this, is about preparation. And this is, for me, this is coming from someone who I would call a frequent flyer. You know, I travel a lot. Whether it is leading expeditions, personal travel, or as a humanitarian. And so the first one, really, I've managed to kind of really dial into through a lot of practice. And that is the kind of the minute detail about if you're traveling to a new location for the first time, how are you going to communicate? You know, have you got an eSIM on your phone? You know, what if the eSIM doesn't work? Have I got burner phones, right? It's really useful. An old Nokia 3310 or whatever phone it is, battery lasts forever, and you get a little SIM card somewhere as soon as you land. You've got a backup phone, that might end up being your primary phone, dependent on where you are. So there's that kind of preparation, making sure you've got the right currency. You've either got things written down in your notebook or they're on your phone. So there's going to be no faff when you get to the airport, when you get to the other side. But the other bit of it, as well as preparation for me, and the bit that I really enjoy if there's time, is research. So, you know, we live in an age where we can buy a guidebook from the internet or a number of guidebooks. We've mentioned maps. We could get some maps that we can look at. And we can even go on YouTube or iPlayer or whatever it is, and we look at documentaries. You know, we might be going to Scandinavia. We look at a documentary by Simon Reeve on Norway or any other number of documentaries. And for me, what that does, if I'm going on a trip, like an expedition or something that is for pleasure, I'm really making it last as long as I possibly can. Because even it might be 6 months before I go, I'm already kind of reading myself in to the environment that I'm going into. So I would advocate the kind of the details for the preparation bit, but for the research, just take the time and enjoy it and read some books about it, watch some documentaries, and you'll reap the benefits when you get there.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same. I mean, you could actually say the same for your holidays or any other adventure that you're having as well. It's, you know, the research element, going into the minute detail, and perhaps even kind of almost living it the first time before you go out there. I'm particularly interested by the idea that you take a burner phone like an old Nokia, and I guess that's a shape of the thing. Is that because smartphones are less reliable out there, or
That is because whatever. So when we talk about communications, we talk about having, in the ideal world, which we're kind of in and out of, you have a PACE plan, and that is for primary, alternative, contingency, and emergency. So even if recently I was trekking in Spain for pleasure, always have backup. And also sometimes the dependent on which networks you're connected to, the most reliable is just the local terrestrial mobile network. And
Yeah.
sometimes a backup Nokia works really well.
Well, I mean, that's probably true for some of the areas that you're close to at the moment as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Great. So that's preparation, and in your case, that's preparation in minute detail. I love
yeah.
that. Great. So, what's your second one?
So the second one is atmospherics. And this is you can take this into personal travel. I would advocate that you do, but this is absolutely something that we do we mentioned some of the environments that we deploy into. Ukraine is a case in point. Um, if you want to understand the environment, the people, if you want to develop this situational awareness that I spoke about previously, you've really got to kind of get out and soak it up. So for me, as best as possible, I even little things like the journey from the airport. You know, if you can get on a local, time dependent, budget dependent, but if you can get on a local bus
Hmm.
from I've just been on a course in Dublin, and just getting on a local bus, uh, and you're with some local people and you're looking around as you go, you just develop your understanding of the environment. And then when you get to wherever it is that you're going to, your accommodation, hotel, Airbnb, whatever, rather than just taxiing everywhere, as long as it's within a reasonable distance, just go for a walk, right?
Yeah.
Just go for a walk, soak it all up,
Get the vibe.
um, get the vibe. Yeah, absolutely, get the vibe. Sit down, have a coffee somewhere. So just by kind of walking around, develop your understanding of the environment. Yeah, and we call that the kind of developing understand the atmospherics.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay. I mean, I do a lot of that stuff as well. Sometimes it's because I'm a cheapskate and I don't want to take taxis everywhere.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
also there is something, and I did a lot of work. I mean, it's a world away, but I did a lot of work in Paris and in Brussels, and even in those places, you do pick up on the local mood
yeah.
just by walking from place to place rather than just taking the taxis and doing the easy thing. And I love that. Those are the moments that create the best moments, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've got preparation and atmospherics, and the third thing.
So the third thing is a kind of maybe a segue from the atmospherics, and this is what I would call immersion.
Okay.
And think about the first thing I would think about where you're going. Again, think about the location, and there are some people might think that there are times to be in a five-star resort which is in the middle of nowhere by a beach, but my own experience is I haven't experienced much of that, but my own experience is you get a lot out of being kind of in the center of town.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of staying in hostels. As we mentioned before, they're good for the budget, but your vibe attracts your tribe. So if you're going on a kind of adventure holiday, then the kind of people who are going to have some information that might help you, or might even want to go along parts of it with you, are are probably going to be in those sort of places. And I've had some incredibly rewarding conversations around the kind of in the lobby and the front desk of a hostel. Even things like I always take a Kindle with me
Mm.
for not because I read a lot because it's small and you can obviously there's lots of stuff on there, but because it's agile. So the amount of times that I've had a conversation with someone in Mongolia or wherever it is in Ulaanbaatar, and someone will say, "Oh, have you read this book that's just come out?" And you can go, "No, I haven't, because it wasn't even released when I started this journey." And you just took on the Wi-Fi, and before you know it, you're on a bus journey reading this new book that's been written about that destination. So that is useful. The kind of the location. There's also the language. I'm by no means a polyglot, but we've got Google Translate that we can use. And absolutely, wherever we go anywhere, uh, it, from a React perspective, we have a little what we call a crib card. So we will just have some basic phrases, some pleases and thank yous, and some introductions. But we'll also have some stuff from a humanitarian perspective. We're here to help you. Who's in charge? Have you had any water? Have you had anything to eat? Have you got any medical problems? And you can kind of develop that. And the thing with that is clearly with dialects is you can read that before you go. And then when you get there, you can just speak to the local people who you're with, whoever they are, taxi drivers, other local humanitarians. What do I need to do to say thank you? Yeah, and you might find it's a colloquial word because of the part of the country that you're in. And the final bit, I think, on the kind of immersion bit is with food. It's really easy to just kind of stay, not step off the beaten track and just go with this is what I could have eaten when I was at home. But I think make the most of it and just kind of be a bit adventurous.
So eat with the locals, and I remember going to Croatia once. I was a project manager on a particular project, and so you kind of feel duty bound with a bunch of other foreign people from outside town going into this restaurant. I thought, well, what's the speciality here, and try and eat like the locals. So I said, yeah, I have the speciality, and it turned out to be frogs. And it was like a plate of a dozen, not like the French would produce it, frogs.
Yeah.
These were like corpses of frogs that I then,
wow.
Everyone else had pizza, of course.
What did their frogs taste like?
It was the look of the thing was quite off-putting. I ate the whole lot.
Yeah.
Tastes a bit like chicken. Yeah. So yeah, I would have been happier with chicken if I'm honest. But yeah, it's just very, very complex to eat, and you kind of think you'd only do it in desperation. Okay, great. So that's the immersion side of it, and what follows after that?
So the bit after this, and this really resonates with if people are having adventures, if you're expeditioning, and also what we do in disaster response, and that is efficiency. Yeah. So whatever it is that you're doing, recently I've been on a sea kayak expedition around an island in Greenland in July, which is incredible. But at the end of every day, the drills are essentially the same, right? We're going to lift the boats out of the water. We're going to take our stuff out of the kayak. We're going to put our tent up. Eventually, there's going to be some food. The more efficiently you can carry out those routine tasks, you're then saving yourself time. So if you're working pretty hard, the sooner you can get your shelter up, have a meal, depending on what environment you're in, dry your kit, you can then give yourself time to sleep, read the Kindle that I've been speaking about, listen to a podcast, reflect on the day, and mentally you're going to be in a better space for whatever it is that you need to do the next day. And often on some of these expeditions, you do need to do a bit of recovery because again, the elements aren't supporting you, particularly on sea kayak expeditions where you can see an impending weather system. Well, we've got to do a big day. We've got to do like 2 days in one, as it were, because we've got to get to where we can make a landing, which physically and mentally as well, perhaps, can take it out of you. Yeah. So you've got to acknowledge that and go, what can I? And I think in these kind of environments, you're more treating your body like a machine, like you. If the frogs are there, well, I need some energy, so I'm just going to eat the frogs, right? Yeah. So I'm thinking more like that. What do I need to replenish the machine so that I can go again at the same pace tomorrow? So definitely, whatever it is, just kind of. And if you're doing this kind of stuff for the first time you're putting up your tent doesn't want to be as it's getting dark on a remote hillside, wherever you're choosing to have an adventure. And that could be an adventure in the UK, right? So get it all nailed in the garden before you go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love that idea of developing the routine. I mean, so many times in life, I find myself being just unnecessarily inconsistent with stuff. Well, that's not the way I did it last time, and this time hasn't worked out quite so well. And so that's what you're talking about, really. It's kind of having that consistency of approach, and that leads to efficiency, which again means you're going to enjoy the downtime, the experience, I
Yeah.
guess, of what you're doing much more. Okay, so we've got preparation, atmospherics, immersion, efficiency. Now, I know you well enough that normally this forms into a word, but it's going to be a pretty freaky word if we when we get to the end of it. What's your fifth adventure habit?
If there's a narrative arc of this, which I think there probably has been so far, we're now talking about the end of our adventure, uh,
Right.
and this is three R's. This is rest, reflect, and reset. Um,
Okay.
So the first bit is the rest really, and dependent on the nature of the expedition that you've been on. I think we've just alluded to it might have been physically and mentally demanding. So acknowledge that, right? And it might be that if you've got the luxury, depending on who you work for and where you work, that you've come off what other people might deem as your holiday, but you now need a bit of time to kind of to rest and recover from that experience.
Hmm.
The most important bit for me is the reflection, is to get the most out of the experience. There's got to be some form of reflective process.
Yeah.
Um, so you're looking back and trying to draw all the positives from the experience. Um, People who are frequent adventurers will be aware of this. You've probably set up a little WhatsApp group. People are sharing photographs and videos and kind of keep that going for a little while. I also find that because I've if I link the research bit that I put at the beginning about watching these documentaries and reading books, now that is much more, that there's a much deeper understanding because I've been in the environment. And I'll give you an example based on where I am now in Sedbergh School. Some people might be aware of the British adventurer and soldier Freddie Spencer Chapman, who wrote the book "The Jungle is Neutral" and coined that phrase, which I absolutely concur with. Um, and he's very famous for what he did when he's out in Malaya. Unbeknown to me, although I knew about him as someone who'd worked in the jungle, he'd also climbed some big mountains in Tibet. And in the 1930s, he had been out on some British sea kayaking expeditions in Greenland.
Yeah.
And their base camp was exactly the same place as our base camp was when we were on this expedition in July. And reading books books about him and books that he had written, autobiographical, having been in some of the exactly the same places this year that he was writing about in the 1930s, was incredibly rewarding. And the
Hmm.
link to Sedbergh School is that he was an orphan. His father was killed in the First World War. He went to Sedbergh School and he was a bit of a loner, and he used to walk out into the fells. And a lot of the stuff about survival and flora and fauna that he used put to good use in the jungles of Malaya and places like Greenland, he learnt here when he was a boy. And there's a memorial to him in the chapel, not far from me now, where we're recording this, that hopefully I'm going to be able to see
Yeah.
in the time while I'm up here. So it's that idea of having of kind of pulling the thread, the golden thread, all the way through, and then
Yeah.
looking back and then drawing whatever you can from that experience. And there might be a few light bulb moments. Like I didn't really understand that, but having been there, I now understand someone else's perspective on
Yeah.
that country or whatever the political situation is.
No, and how fantastic that you've actually gone and done the things that
Yeah,
he's done in the same
yeah.
sort of
And
environment.
it's a privilege. I mean, and also, I don't forget that it is a privilege to be in a job and a life where you can kind of travel so frequently and get around a bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm always wowed by some of the travelogues that actually I just yeah. So the one behind me that's just over there is called The Worst Journey in the World. Now, it's not a journey I would ever take, but to read what Aspi Cherry
Yeah,
Garrard,
I've read that in Antarctica. Yeah,
oh my
yeah,
God, it is the worst journey in the world. You
yeah,
realise that when
yeah,
you read it, this is not an understatement, this title. And I actually went to his old school to go and see where his plaque was and all that
oh
sort of
wow,
stuff.
yeah,
So overawed by how it was. And fortunately, it's quite close to here. It's at Winchester.
yeah,
And yeah, it was it's great to get like a physical connection. I mean, in your case, amplified because you've been and done the things that he
Yeah,
did. I would never choose to do what this guy did.
yeah. No, I don't
It's,
think many people would.
no, no. Anyway, it's a great book if anyone wants to read it. Fantastic. And then the reset element. There was a third R on the end of that.
Yeah, and that the reset is particularly pertinent to what I and my teams do as disaster responders.
Yeah.
Um, and and there's two bits to it, and one is linked to the rest and the reflection. Is that you have to be ready to go again, and the other bit is that you have to kind of reconcile yourself to the things that happened when you were on that deployment.
Mm.
And we spend a lot of time when people come back. We kind of we do an after action review. We'll debrief it as a team and make sure that. So sometimes some people who might be on the periphery might not really understand how important their actions were.
Yeah.
Um, and not everybody can be the team that is on the ground physically interfacing with the affected population, delivering the humanitarian aid, but it's a team effort, from the people who are on the ground in the disaster zone, from the people back in the UK. So it's making sure that everybody, there's a joined up picture.
Yeah.
Everyone can see the importance of each other's actions. Yeah, and coming to terms with whatever it was that happened, in order that in fairly short order you might have to be able to go away and do and be as committed in another part of the world, in another area, and another group of people that have been affected by
Yeah.
a disaster. And because I do it so frequently, um, I now almost just roll when I come back. I just roll into that rest, that reflection, that reset, and part of that is physical, cleaning equipment, whatever, repacking bags, and then you're ready for the next disaster.
Fantastic. I'm just wondering whether, if I was away on holiday and I saw you turning up, should I feel very nervous that something really bad's about to happen?
Yeah,
Well, I mean that's absolutely fantastic. I mean, what I've learned in the last few days about React is just how important that partnership is. You have this broad network of stakeholders and operatives that you have to work kind of tooth in groove, like the cogs in a machine, really. With UN agencies, other non-governmental
yeah. You
organizations,
you have
in country,
to
out of
you,
country.
you have to make we call it you have to make friends before you need them.
Yeah,
In the hour of disaster is not the time. So if you can do that as best as you possibly can, um, make those friends, develop those relationships, uh, and in terms of the interpersonal communications which are so important, if you've already met somebody, even if in this day and age it's on a call like we're having now, if it's on a Zoom call or a Teams call, things just move that much faster. You've
yeah.
already gone some way in developing that rapport, which you can then further develop when you meet people in person.
That's fantastic. Yeah, yeah, that is so true. And yet the temptation nowadays is to try and keep things so remote until it's at the last minute. And it's actually a theme that's come up a few times on this podcast. Is that those face to face interactions, even in a medium like this, make a lot of difference. Make
Yeah,
a lot of difference. Okay, fantastic. So, time for a brief recap. So, the 5 adventure habits. First one is preparation, and for you, that's in minute detail. And I particularly like the fact that the old Nokia is the thing that might bounce along beside you a little bit better than
yeah,
tried and trusted complex technology. Um, and then it's about the atmospherics, about understanding the situation that you're getting into, and that might come from taking the local transport rather than taxiing around. Like keying into the vibe. And then the immersion side of it, I liked your phrase, your vibe attracts your tribe. And how else are people going to know what your vibe is unless you interact with them? And how better can you interact than actually staying in the places where either the local people or the traveling people or whoever are staying? And
Yeah.
that's like the hostels. And I'm a big fan of that. I'm not big on spending. Well, I don't have the money to spend money on
Yeah.
5-star hotels. I'm simply
Yeah.
a hat maker. That's all. So, and then eating the tray of frogs if it's put in front of you. And then it's efficiency, and I like this. This is one I really struggle with, because I tend to do things as they come to me or whatever, and actually having that's fine, but having routines for the things that are going to regularly crop up, then how better to put those in place and just make yourself more efficient when it comes down to things like preparing for your adventure and packing up and drying out and all that sort of stuff. Then there's kind of like you squeezed in 3 R's at the end for the 5th adventure habit: rest, reflect, and reset. And really, for me, I take home from that the reflect one, that it's really to get the most out of an experience. You can draw back on that research you did right at that first stage in preparation,
Yeah.
and see where you've moved on from that point or how you've absorbed that in. And that was a lovely example of having a book that you read beforehand, and suddenly you're walking in the footsteps of that person, and then that overflows into other aspects of life, like where you are right now, probably only a few yards from the actual school where that guy
Yeah.
headed out from.
Yeah.
So Paul, that you're the first humanitarian, React is the first humanitarian agency to be on here. We're on chapter 20 of the Adventure Habits pod now, so really honoured to have had that. But you're certainly not the first veteran. I think it's probably about half of the people that we've had on here have
Yeah.
been veterans. I think we can all learn a great deal about adventure, efficiency in adventure, but also how to get the majority of the good out of an adventure that we can from you guys. So a salute to you, sir. And
Thank you.
it's been an absolute honour to have you here. So
It's been an absolute pleasure, David. Thank you.
is there any shout outs that you'd like to make to anyone, or links you'd like to have added in?
Yeah, I mean, I think just React, really, just to, as you said you're going to do, just a shout out to React. And as ever on a podcast like this, I'm the face of React. You might say that's a bad thing, but there's a lot of people behind me doing all the hard work, and making it all tick along.
And it's such an honour to meet all of to meet a proportion of those just the other day. Well, Paul, thanks so much. We'll put all those links into the bio for this podcast, and it just remains for me to say thank you from all our listeners.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Absolute pleasure.
And good luck out there.